Yes, absolutely. There is hope. We could suddenly find ourselves back on a gold standard in a crisis. The situation, the scenario I'm describing, where the CBDCs are used to create a debt jubilee for the world, is just one scenario. But we might go into a crisis before we've got the CBDC, and they might say, and nobody trusts the currency anymore, and they might say, well, we're back on a gold standard.
Wednesday, December 6th, 2023, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Hi, Clive. How are you?
Good morning, Mario. I'm looking forward to hearing about that new book you're waving around there.
Well, it's not such a new book, but I've referenced it and recommended many times to the viewers what government has done to our money by Murray Rothbard. And what we're going to do today, Clive, is I'm going to go over very in a summary way over this book and how Murray Rothbard describes how money evolved and how it's actually something that is really derives from the free market, from exchange between people. And then I'm going to posit that all that is going away. And then you're going to come in and talk about how that's going to go away with CBDC. So, because I think CBDC is like the end game for tyranny against the public in terms of what the public can do, because money is just like a way to for people to transact. So hopefully that's okay with you, Clive.
I'm looking forward to it. Of course, the CBDC is the next evolution of money from what you're going to talk about. Why don't you start at the beginning and tell
Yeah.
us all about how money has gone down the drain?
Yeah, I mean, he talks about here, uh, how, for example, money in a free society and the value of exchange. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is an interesting part. How did money begin? And he says clearly, Robinson Crusoe had no need for money. He could not have eaten gold coins. Neither could have Crusoe and Friday. Perhaps exchanging fish for lumber need to bother about money. But when society expands beyond a few families, the stage is already set for the emergence of money. So, yeah, money is something that evolved, as he said. And he goes on to talk about barter, how people, that's direct exchange, and how many times there's a problem because you have something that I need, but I don't have anything that you need. So you can't do that direct exchange. The other thing he talks about um, exchange is that it's very important because um, there's a great variety in nature, according to Rothbard. And well, it's true. He says the variety in man and diversity of location of natural resources. Every man has a different set of skills and aptitudes, and every plot of ground has its own unique features. So he goes over that, how exchange is important. And then the third step is indirect exchange. That's when people in a free market realize that there's something that everyone wants. So that it makes exchange easier, because if you accumulate that commodity or whatever it is that everyone wants, you'll be able to exchange things more easily. The other thing he talks about, and I think is really important, people don't realize, when you have a free market in exchange and money, people are more easily specialize. They focus on what they're good at because the system works well. In a 100% barter system, it's very hard to specialize, and you have to be subsistent. And so what indirect exchange does, and money does, it helps society specialize, evolve. I mean, we wouldn't be where we are today if we hadn't had money. So Yeah, that's what he talks about, and his theory is that without free exchange, without money, free money, and by free he means the free market money, it's very hard to be free. So what Rothbard says is that when government tries to interfere, it always disrupts the free exchange of goods, services, interactions between people. And he doesn't see any reason why money shouldn't be something private in a free market. And he also says that in a free market in money and exchange, there's no inflation because people are trying to, they're exchanging value for value. So now I'm just going to quickly summarize what I think has been the evolution ever since, let's say, the beginning of the 20th century. We had a pretty much private, let's say, exchange of money. I know the money had been minted by governments, but people held their own gold coins, silver coins. There were some banknotes, but some people didn't even have to have a bank account. And then, unfortunately, with World War One, they took us off real money, gold. In the UK, by the early 1950s, there's no more silver in the system. And now, in the last 20, 30 years, they've taken us into credit cards, debit cards, internet banking. We still have the banknotes, which are actually not real money, but they're like a promissory note. But they're still called cash, but they're going to try to take us away from that. And yes, I think we're very near where we go from a place where we're exchanging value for value with people, and then we went into the money or commodity that people chose, and we are almost at the end game, I think, in terms of that history. And I think CBDC is the way the powers that be want to implement that. So with that, I'll let you tell us what you think is going to happen and how CBDCs are going to be an instrument of tyranny, and whether you think they'll be able to impose this system. I'm not too sure. Hopefully, people will wake up to it. People who are watching this, maybe.
So, as you say, Mario, we've had thousands of years of history where gold was money. And then, of course, at some point, governments start to take control of the system, and they quickly learn the trick of debasing the money. So in the early years of the 20th century, the US dollar contained a certain number of grains of gold. And then later on, they reduced that to about half. And finally, in 1971, they reduced the number of grains of gold in the dollar to zero. And the same thing happened with virtually every other currency on the planet. Well, actually, every other currency. There's no currency today which actually contains any gold at all. And as you say, we moved on to electronic forms of money like the credit card and bank accounts and so forth. And the next step in that road will be what's known as the central bank digital currency, or the CBDC for short. Currently, there are over 100 countries which are working on bringing in a CBDC. And it's likely that many of those CBDCs will be around by 2025, at least in the pilot phase. And by 2027, almost all of them will be operating. Of course, we already have a central bank digital currency operating in China, and that goes along with your social scoring. So we'll talk about the dangers of that later on, maybe. But let me just talk a little bit about the central bank digital currency and why it's different from the money you're using today. Central bank digital currency is a direct liability of the central bank, just as the pound notes in your pocket are a liability of your central bank. But the bank account you have, or your credit card, or the other assets you have are not a liability of the central bank at all. So when we move to the central bank digital currency, the plan is for the CBDC, which will probably be initially on your phone. That will be replacing your wallet, and initially you'll have both your old wallet with your banknotes in it and your new wallet with your digital money, the central bank digital money, effectively the same thing. And you'll be able to change your money one for one from your cash to your CBDC wallet via your bank, or you'll be able to go to your bank and say, move some money out of my bank account into my CBDC wallet. Now, in the UK and other countries, they're talking about having an initial limit on the amount of money in the CBDC wallet to stop or to avoid any danger of disrupting the banking system. In the UK, they're talking about £10,000 to £20,000 as an initial limit in your CBDC wallet. I think the figure most talked about is the £20,000 limit, which some people would regard as more than enough to carry around with you in your pocket. But later on, we'll have another phase where you will have your bank running a CBDC wallet for you. So in your bank account, you'll have your old bank accounts, which the bank can do what they like with. They can take that, your old money, and lend it to a spotty teenager to buy an Xbox if they want. That's what they're doing today. Or they'll run your one of your CBDC wallets for you, which they won't be able to touch because that is not, you're not authorizing to spend your CBDC wallet. That's like they're holding a pile of banknotes in a safety deposit box for you. But for larger amounts, I think it's quite likely the bank will be administering a second CBDC wallet on your behalf. I am fully expecting that over time, the use of cash will die away. And by the way, I'm not in favor of this, but I think it's an inevitability. And I also think that it's quite likely in due course, a law will be passed in many countries, if not all, saying that the CBDC must be used for all transactions for tax monitoring purposes, for anti-money laundering purposes, which means that before you can spend money, you'll have to move money out of your bank account into your CBDC wallet, either at your bank or the one you're carrying around on your person in your phone, and then you can do what you like with it. And that's all well and good as long as the exchange rate is 1 for 1 and you can do it freely. But what I think first of all, if I go a little bit of background, we have a really big problem with the monetary system today, and that is the level of government's debts. It's reached proportions which cannot be sustained in the long run. So something could go terribly wrong with that. And I think we will get a black swan event of some description in the coming years. Well, we get them all the time, but let's say there's a big one. It could be a California earthquake wiping out trillions of dollars of assets and the stock markets are crashing. I mean, it could be anything really. And they might use that as an opportunity to restrict how much money you can put in your CBDC wallet. It might go along the lines of, oh my goodness, everybody's rioting, so we don't want you to go down to the shops and emptying the shops and becoming a hoarder, so we'll limit you how much you can have in your CBDC wallet for that. Or people are speculating against the pound or speculating against the dollar, or the financial markets are in disarray. So we need to put some sort of restriction on how much you can convert from the old currency into the CBDC wallet. Now, whether that'll be they change the 1 for 1 exchange rate to some other ratio, whether they say it's limited to a maximum of so much, or whether they say you need some sort of permission, or if maybe they just control what you can do with your money in the CBDC wallet. Because one of the things about the CBDC currency is it will be programmable. They will be able to tell you, if they choose to do so, and I know we have lots of comments that this won't happen, but I think it's going to happen sooner or later, inevitably. They'll be able to control if you spend it, what you spend it on, how you spend it, whether you receive a positive interest rate, whether you receive a negative interest rate. So it's entirely possible that in the early stages, things might happen where we all agree with it. People are going into town to participate in rioting. Well, they might restrict you from buying train tickets to get into town or buying petrol to get into town while that's happening. But that's the first step in a dystopian future where the control gets larger and larger. But let's just talk through the financial aspects of it as opposed to the...
Clive, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to play this so people realize that what Clive said there about programmable, he's not just making it up. I'm going to share here a clip of the managing director of the Bank for International Settlements, which is basically the bank for the central banks. It was created in 1930, and the major shareholders are the European central banks and the Wall Street banks. I mean, JP Morgan, Chase, I think First National, Citibank, they were all, you can look in the statutes, they were the people who funded this bank. So here is Mr. Karsten talking about that.
A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is. A key difference.
So there you go. I'll stop here, Clive.
So as you saw, there will be total control over what you can do with your central bank digital currency. And of course, there will be lots of situations where that control is imposed and we all approve of it. So for example, if money falls into the hands of a terrorist organization, they'll be able to freeze their wallet. And I think we'll all agree with that. But, you know, what about the more mundane situations? Perhaps, and I say mundane, we probably all agree with this, but what about drug dealing, which used to happen with the cash, and now with no cash, and it starts to happen on the CBDC wallets? Well, they could shut off the wallets of the drug dealers, and I don't think we have any great problem with that. But it's steps along the road. What about the lady who's on Social Security, and she's now told she's got to spend the money on food, and she's not allowed to spend it on gambling or booze? You know, that we might say, well, that sounds reasonable, but where does it stop? And what about the housewife who's now trying to store up a little bit of money secretly? Well, in the old days, she could tuck it away and hide it at the bottom of the drawer to make her get away from the abuser. Well, it's obviously going to be in her CBDC wallet in the future, and that's going to make life much more difficult for her, because she'll be her partner will be forcing her to hand over her password potentially. So there's a lot of human rights issues here in the incoming CBDC. But I really wanted to talk about the not the programmability of it, but how we go to the next, or what might happen as the next step. And the next step, I think, is, I mentioned we could have a black swan event. They now restrict how much money you can move from your old bank account to your new CBDC wallet. And that basically means your old money is effectively becoming unusable, or only usable within a limit, or only usable with permission, or only usable on the things that the government lets you use it on. But I think more likely you won't be able to use it at all. Now, what does that mean? It's basically a wealth destruction event. It's destroyed all the surplus wealth, which is in the form of money market funds, deposits, pension funds, and of course, your government bonds. Now, that sounds like a terrible thing. And the biggest losers will be the holders of those assets. But on the other hand, from the government's point of view, they're going to see it as a good thing, because now they have no more debt, or at least they do have a debt, but it's a debt which is now in a defunct currency, which you can't use to speculate against the new CBDC, which is basically what the economy is running on. Now, there will be a lot of losers, and what's the government going to do about the losers? Well, they will have bailout plans for the pension funds, and bailout plans for the pensioners, and bailout plans for those who are hard hit. And the man in the street, I have no doubt at all, he won't lose anything, because he'll be able to convert whatever he's got in the bank and up to a certain limit, let's say 10 or 20,000 pounds, maybe. I don't know what the limit would be. And so, and they'll probably use this as an opportunity to bring in a universal basic income. And they'll be able to do all of these bailouts because they'll be starting from a debt to GDP ratio in the new CBDC of 0 instead of the 100% or whatever they have today. So as in terms of a solution from the government's point of view, it offers a solution. But clearly at the other end of the scale, those who've worked very hard all their life, built up some savings in the bank account or in government bonds, or if they bought bonds of Apple or IBM or Microsoft or Facebook, those bonds are all going to be denominated in an old currency. The lifetime savings will be basically now held in a bond which is maturing in a defunct currency, which you won't be able to convert to your new currency. And you will get, as I say, if you're a citizen of the country and you are on hard times, you'll certainly get your universal basic income. I think you'll certainly get some of your money converted. But if you happen to be very rich, if you don't need it, if you happen to be foreign, or if you're just simply undeserving for some reason, you probably won't find you get much in the way of compensation. Those who own those who own land and equities and gold and silver and Bitcoin and other things should be fine because they'll have some of that. But of course, what's left in the bank will be effectively now in a defunct currency because your old currency can't be converted to CBDC. Now, those are various steps along the road, which I think one way that the end to the debt problem may come, the debt problem of the governments. I think the question a lot of your users will be asking is, when?
Yeah.
Do you have any comments?
Yeah, and when the other question I have is about taxation, because I've always been like employed. It's only in the last 6-7 years that I've been self-employed, and I've been conscious of having to keep some cash on the side for my tax returns and to pay income tax. And so do big companies. They employ loads of people, and they have to pay their taxes. What happens when they make the old currency, not usable or worthless? How do they get the taxes? Does that mean they won't need the tax because the debt will be down to zero? Does that mean that we won't have to pay any tax, or our tax rates are going to go down? What do you think about that?
Well, there's certainly one part of your tax which the government won't need anymore. They won't need to raise tax from you to service the interest and the principal of the national debt, because there won't be any. That national debt will be now in a defunct currency. So they won't be defaulting on the old currency. They'll just be printing it out of existence till it's completely worthless, because there's no need to tax it. In the old days, they had to tax it. Otherwise, it would have gone to be worthless anyway. But now the new currency, the CBDC, their debt to GDP ratio will be on day one effectively at zero. And even if they carry out a lot of spending, a lot of infrastructure spending, a lot of bailouts for those who are impoverished by the lack of convertibility of the old currency, they will still have an extremely low debt to GDP. You must remember it's taken hundreds of years to get to our current debt to GDP ratio of over 100%. So it would, even a lot of spending would only the debt to GDP ratio is only increasing by a few percent a year. So perhaps they'd only get to 3 or 5 or 10%, which is really, compared with where we are today, absolutely nothing. And it's very, very, very affordable for a government. So that part of the tax would go. But in terms of collecting taxes, your salary would be going into a CBDC wallet, either at your bank or a CBDC wallet in your phone. That would be easy to monitor. But there's going to be an awful lot of complicated situations. I mean, what about when you pay your babysitter? We used to give the babysitter cash in hand. Now, will she have to, she'll effectively be liable for tax. Will they take it off her as it goes into the wallet, or will they sit back, wait for her to file a tax return, or will they take it off her and say, when you file the tax return, we'll give it back to you if you're not liable for tax? What about the casual laborer who comes to cut your grass, or the illegal immigrant who cleans your house? What about the gift you make to your grandchild, which you put into the Christmas card? We used to slip a £10 note, or these days a £50 note, into the Christmas card for your grandchild, and they'd put it in the piggy bank. But of course, you won't be able to do that in the future. So there's going to be a lot of complicated tax issues arising, and a lot of people are going to be somehow put into the tax net who probably aren't liable for tax and probably don't know how to fill in the paperwork to get it back.
Well, I think it might awaken like an old form of money, maybe silver. Give the babysitter 1 ounce Britannia, or who knows? I think the powers that be have no clue about how people still are into like gold and silver, and how it could backfire. You spoke about the CBDC being able to track, let's say, a pensioner, or or someone that is not well, and they're not supposed to drink or smoke anymore because they might also be on benefits. And we're seeing this here in the UK now. This is from the National. Scott says Department of Work and Pension Plans plan to monitor benefit claimants' bank accounts. So with the CBDC, it would be much easier to monitor that. And they're already talking about monitoring people who are on benefits. And Clive, you said that the CBDC would be the liability of the central bank. Could you explain to the viewers where the liability lies now? It's with the private banks, right?
Yeah. So when you have a bank account, that is a liability of your bank, because the amount of money which is backing what the bank owes you, the real money, i.e. the money printed by the central bank, is very, very low, because don't forget, every pound which is printed, every dollar which is printed is effectively recycled perhaps 10 times. How does that work? Well, the central bank, let's say there's £10 in the bank to start with, they let, let's call it 100. They lend that £100 to you to buy a house. You buy a house with it. The seller of that house then puts the £100 in the bank, and they lend it out a second time. Maybe they only lend £90 of it out the second time, and the next person buys a bicycle with it, and the seller of the bicycle puts the £90 in the bank, and the bank then lends £80 of it. So you can see that initial £100 is going around multiple times and creates many tens of times of the in money terms of the original amount. So when you have a bank balance, that is categorically a liability of your bank, and your bank would not be able to pay you if everybody wanted their money back at the same time, unless they could call in all the money they lent out at exactly the same time, which they obviously can't do, because people can't repay loans at short notice. Whereas the central bank digital currency is exactly the same as the banknotes in your pocket are today. So it's like asking your bank, if you have the money at your bank in the CBDC wallet managed by them, they're literally holding banknotes for you. It's not really banknotes, but it's the same thing. They can't go and lend it to a spotty teenager to buy his Xbox. The banknotes, your CBDC wallet is like the banknotes you have in your wallet today. So those are basically liabilities of the central bank, and that's the reason they don't want you to put all your money on day one into this CBDC wallet, because if all the money left the banking system, the whole system would collapse. That's the reason why most governments are proposing a maximum holding in the CBDC wallet, £20,000 in the case of the UK. I don't know what it is elsewhere. I haven't really looked around the world for that. But they may ease up on those limits later on when they see that too much money isn't rushing to the CBDC wallets. But we have to remember, when this CBDC currency arrives, it still is not at that point backed by anything tangible. It's not backed by gold. You could go to the shops and change and buy some a gold coin, or you can sell a gold coin and put the money back into your CBDC wallet. But there's no guarantee from the government that it's gold, so they will be able to inflate it just the way they've inflated the old currency, except, of course, they'll be starting on day one from a much sounder footing than they were before, because that massive government debt that they currently have effectively won't exist, and therefore they won't have the massive amount of interest to pay on that national debt. So the rate of inflation of the money supply does not have to be, I'm not saying it won't be, but it doesn't have to be as fast as it's been at the moment. But we all know that right now, in the situation we're in, the amount of government debt is increasing fairly rapidly, and sooner or later that government debt, which is a promise to pay you money in the future, gets monetized. Either well, in general, it's by the central bank taking in the government bonds and printing the money in return.
Yeah, it seems to me that the people who could lose the most are people who have over £20,000, let's say, in the bank, in savings. And I'm not talking here about the 85,000 insurance from the FSCS. I'm talking about just having more than you're going to be able to have in CBDC, because eventually, like you said, Clive, they will not allow you to use the old pound balance. So yeah, I think it will be the people in the middle and also the very, very wealthy who are keeping too much too much balance in the bank, and also maybe in old pound government debt as well. All those, like you said, and that's why I think converting as much paper wealth into hard assets is really important. I'm not giving advice here. So did I miss something there, Clive? I think when we...
Not really, but I think an important thing to say is there's literally trillions and trillions out there in bonds, government bonds, and cash. And someone somewhere is going to be the bag holder. Now, in general, the bag holders are going to be the foreign governments, Japan, China. They're going to be, UK has US treasuries as well. The bag holders are going to be the large pension funds, the wealthy, the people who have, for whatever reason, a large money market fund or a large bond portfolio or a bond fund. Those people will be the losers. And the government will probably say, well, you've got your universal basic income, you've got enough in your wallet to live on. So, you're not hard off, and we're seeing you're right. But of course, there will be some complaints. But those people are going to be in the minority. The man in the street, that's 95% of the population, I would say, probably doesn't have two dimes to get rubbed together in most countries, and he's going to be fine. He'll see his small balance converted over. He'll get his universal basic income. Thank you very much. He'll say, I'm very pleased to have that. He'll probably get some sort of bonus paid to him in the new currency to kickstart the system, especially if there's a bit of social unrest and they want to pacify the population. So he'll be very pleased about that. And he'll probably say, well, it's only the rich who've lost money. They can afford it, so it serves them right. I think that'll be the attitude of the man in the street. And the 5% of the wealthy who have lost some money, well, they will be rather disappointed for what they've lost. And they'll say, pity about my bond fund, pity about my money market fund, pity about my deposits. But at least I had my house, I had my paintings, I had my country house, I had my gold, I had my silver, I had my stocks and shares, I have my Bitcoin, I have my works of art. And at the end of the day, I'm still going to eat.
That what will happen to mortgages and other kinds of debt? Will that be wiped out?
So this kind of situation has happened before, and as a general rule, the winners are those who had borrowed money, i.e. with mortgages, and the losers are those who lent the money, i.e. the bank, or these days would be the bank, but of course it wasn't always the case that there was the bankers. In some cases, and I think this happened when Germany had the currency reset, the Eastern German to the Western German, I think part of the mortgage was converted to the new currency and part of it was abandoned. So it depends on the rules of each country. So each country will certainly bring in its own set of rules, and they won't be universally the same. But my point is, in general, if you're a man in the street with a mortgage on your house, you're probably going to be very, very happy about that, because your mortgage effectively is left behind in a defunct currency, which you can either abandon or pay off for a few cents on the pound. So in that respect, I think the man in the street who's got a house with a mortgage is going to feel a lot better off, and he'll now be able to rehypothecate his house to spend money. Good for the economy, because now he'll be spending more. His credit card debt at the date that the old currency becomes worthless will be left behind in that old currency as well. So he'll be able to run up new debt in the CBDCs probably. And so that's pretty good. The companies, manufacturing companies which have borrowed money by the way of bonds or borrowing from the bank, they'll be happy enough, because those borrowings will be left behind in old currency, which means that they'll be able to go out, spend money, build new factories, employ more people. And of course, the turnover and the demand will have gone up from the man in the street. And the government will be quite happy, because they've got no liability hanging around their neck due to the national debt gone. So the government will be able to enter into all kinds of spending programs, infrastructure programs. So it could be very beneficial for mankind. But of course, in this situation, there will still be the losers. It's not like the whole world wins. Maybe collectively the world wins because we go into an era of economic growth, because that debt burden hanging around everybody's neck has been lifted. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be everybody who's the net beneficiary. So the purpose of me telling you all this is for those who think they might be affected in the wrong way. They can take evasive action. And Maria, you know exactly what to tell them.
Yeah, the other thing about the debt and the mortgages and stuff, yes, I agree with you. They will be wiped out when this happens, but we're not telling you to go out there and take on loads of debt, because in the meantime, you might not be able to service it and you could lose your house. But so you need to weigh that up. Yeah, what am I going to tell the viewers? Well, yeah, you need to try to be outside the system as much as possible. If you have been fortunate enough to have some wealth, and you have it in paper assets, you need to start thinking about, maybe like Clive says, building an extension to your house, putting a new conservatory in your house, or buying a few gold or silver coins to have outside the system, or buying an antique car, whatever floats your boat. And Clive,
or pay your taxes early.
Yeah, pay your taxes early. Yeah, I'm learning that, being self-employed now, that yeah, they want really early your taxes. So unfortunately, I have to pay it. And the other thing, Clive, it seems to me that the purpose of this CBDC is not just to wipe out the debt so the government can start again, and maybe it's even kind of like a jubilee for everyone, because their debts will be wiped out. But the other more nefarious objective, I think, is that once that happens, they'll have total control over everything you do commercial, every transaction we do commercially, not just companies but individuals. It requires money or currency. Is that the way you see it? They're killing two birds with one stone there.
Initially, we have promises, at least in some countries like the UK, that they're not going to allow this sort of spying to be going on. But you can imagine that's not going to last very long, because they will find. I mentioned the situation where perhaps a sanctioned individual or a terrorist has got his hands on money, and they want to prevent him from, or punish him, or prevent him from doing bad things. And so they will have, the ability is going to be there, and they're going to use that ability not only to control what certain people do with their money, but also to know what they're doing with their money, which means they'll have a far better grip on the economy. And if you're spending, or if you're panicking and rushing down to the shops to buy toilet paper, well, they might be able to restrict how many rolls of toilet paper you can buy. I was reading a book. I haven't finished it. I'm up to about chapter 6, which is describing a future society. It's called 2024. 1984 Revisited. And in one of the instances, there's a guy in China on the platform of a railway station. He's a grandfather, wants to visit his daughter in Shanghai. And he goes to the ticket counter to buy his ticket. And he's told that his social score isn't high enough to allow him to travel to a different province. And this is one of the dystopian uses that could happen. Of course, this is just a story, and I don't really know if that's going on in China at all. I'm not suggesting the Chinese are doing it, but I'm absolutely sure they can do it, and I'm absolutely sure that we could do it in any country where we've got the CBDC up and running. So little by little, these kinds of monitoring and controls might come in to such an extent that you no longer feel like you're a free person. You have to toe the party line, or you're going to be punished through your wallet.
Yeah, I think they could easily change the rules here in other countries when there's a big crisis and it justifies. They'll say, "Oh, we'll just adopt now the CBDC." Well, unfortunately, there's this, like in 2020, 2021, because they're saying here as well that they're gonna have cash go along with the CBDC. It's not going to be just CBDC, but let's say there's another pandemic. I don't like mentioning that word, and then they could even say, look, we got to stop using the cash now because it's contagious. Let's go to the CBDC, and that's what they will do. And Clive, what about the Christine Lagarde's, or the elites of the world? Will they have like a private, non-monitored CBDC just for those people that are part of the club? What do you think?
I'm quite sure that in certain countries which will remain nameless, those who are in the club have a lot of privileges that are not available to the ordinary guy. I won't name countries because I don't want to get into a political debate here. But I mean, even at the most mundane level in the UK, for example, we see certain ministers getting invited to speak at lunches and being paid very large sums of money, which we all know it's not a bribe, is it? But it's a lot of money. And of course, then the people who pay the money to go to these events get to sit next to the relevant minister and can have their say. And the minister's getting a lot of money because he's been there. There's a certain level of it, but that's very low key. You can imagine in other countries, the benefits to the elite are much more obvious to the elite and probably kept as a secret from the public at large.
And maybe
yes, I think so.
Yeah, and maybe they will use Bitcoin for that, because I've heard that the powers that be are heavily into Bitcoin, and that they were behind it, but that's another subject. So Clive, any final words for the viewers about money, about CBDC, and do you think there's any hope that this all fails and we go back to a world where we're more free, like Murray Rothbard talks about?
It's entirely possible. There are lots of other ways they could deal with the debt problem. None of them are very good, and they're especially not good for the people who hold that debt. But there's plenty of ways that that could be dealt with. I don't think default is one of them for the Western countries, but it would be tantamount for the holder of that debt as if it had defaulted, I think. So any last words? Well, I won't say too much on it because I've spoken, but I did touch briefly on the problem of government debt and why this is drawing to a close, because the government debts are really just too large now for governments to handle, and they're growing faster and faster, and the interest on that debt is growing faster and faster. But if you'd like to read more about what I've written on that, I'm on LinkedIn, and I've written and I write literally several times a week, and there's many articles I've written about the direction of travel, where it's going, and how it's going to spiral out of control. If nothing changes, and I don't see it changing rapidly, that debt level is going to spiral out of control. We don't know which straw will break the camel's back. We don't know what the breaking point is. We don't know what the final nail in the coffin is. But, I think the governments of this world are having their last gasp. We're looking at the dying embers of a debt-based system which can't last. And it's only a question of time before we have the final blow, the grand finale to this overburdened debt, and we enter the end game, and the whole thing goes crashing down in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I think Powell and the Federal Reserve are having the last throw of dice by raising the interest rates, but that I think that probably will be their last hurrah.
I agree with you, and I think either way, and by either way, I mean we'll have a hyperinflationary, melt up, or if they raise rates too far or keep rates tight for too long, we could have a deflationary crash. And in either either instance, I think it's really good not to have to be too much in the system, have too much hold debt, not be in debt, but hold be the creditor. And that's why, I keep saying, try to have a foot outside the system. As Clive has said, diversification is always good. Never put all your eggs into one basket. So, Clive, thank you for your time. And hopefully for the viewers, this has been helpful.
Thank you, Mario. And thanks to all your viewers. And I'll just remind your viewers that they should give you the thumbs up so you can get some traction on your program.
Oh, thank you, Clive. And also for the viewers, if they want to communicate with Clive, try to connect with him on LinkedIn. And also, you can comment in the comment sections and say, Clive, what do you think? So I think you're active there too, right?
Yeah, I always go and look at the comments, certainly the days which follow, and try to reply to. I don't reply to every comment, but I reply to one or two, which are the more interesting questions. And so you're welcome to put a comment in the comment section. I'll reply to that, or make me a comment or direct message through LinkedIn, and I'll reply to that.
Great. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye now.
Bye.